Mabuhay to all my Filipino brothers and sisters, for this is my second home in Asia. First, I would like to offer a round of applause to all of our panel speakers, for they made my job very easy today. You know, one of the things that I really appreciated from these speakers is their unique contribution of their knowledge and of their background to the issue of unification and the hope and possibility that it can offer the Korean people, and not only the Korean people, the region and the world. As many of you who have followed this work for many years have known, I've been a champion of the Korean dream that I wrote about in my book. And it's really inspired by the founding vision of the Korean people, where the Korean people were given a providential mandate to benefit all mankind through the Hong-ingan ideal. This aspiration, this providential mandate and aspiration was what made the independence movement of the early 19th century so real, not only in my family's lifetime, but in the families of millions of Koreans that gave their life for Korean independence. But they had a dream that a new Korean nation that could come about from the liberation from Japanese occupation, that new Korean nation will not be a vindictive nation, would not utilize the victim and victimizer framework to attack those who belittled and took away their humanity, but to even work with those who were their colonizers, based upon high moral principles rooted in the Hong-ingan ideal, to create a greater region of Asia and eventually set the precedent for the world. I believe, especially in this world of confusion today, where the world is fragmenting into its own little spheres, trudging back up all of the old animosities, hatred, bitterness, sense of victimized and victimizers. Bring that hatred to the fore, that the unification of the Korean Peninsula, that goes all the way back to the early 20th century. For remember, it was in 1919, inspired by the vision as expounded by President Wilson, that all colonized nations should eventually have a pathway forward for their own national sovereignty, for own self-determination. They were the first ones to rise up to that call that launched the movement for national restoration for many nations that were under the yoke of colonialism in the 20th century. The only remnant of that evil past lies on the Korean Peninsula today. Of course, the dreams of the Korean people to build a nation that can be a model to the world was dashed when Korea was divided in 1948 into two nations that fell within the larger Cold War sphere. This had not been the aspiration of the Korean people, nor those who gave their life for Korean independence. And this is many times lost to those who are foreign to the history of Korea. Those in the South as well as the North were all members of Korean unification or Korean independence movement. That was where their core was. That is why when you look at the Republic of Korea took the name, the Republic of Korea. North Korea also wanted to claim the Republic of Korea identity. That was central to the movement of independence. That is why they call the DPRK, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. To this day, that DNA is embedded not only in the South, but in the North. That is a legacy of Kim Jong-un's grandfather. That is a legacy of his father. And that is a legacy of those who built the North Korean state. We all recognize that the North Korean state is an aberration. It's a far cry from the aspirations of the Korean people before division under the specter of this Cold War. This is a time, however, as we've now moved into the beginning of the 21st century, that dream that had inspired and sparked generations of Koreans can be realized in this generation. Leaving in the past all the evils of the 20th century, the bloodiest century in human history, that can offer the hope in a world in crisis that is fragmenting, dredging up all of their bitterness and hatred amongst their neighbors, that a vision can bring a divided people together, create a new nation that can be the inspiration for not only this region of Asia, but of the world, rooted in the Hongingan ideal. As a person of deep faith, I always remind people that the concept of freedom and human rights is a relatively new concept. It did not exist throughout the course of human history. The nation that championed that understanding that we take for granted today was the United States. And I would say that the most important document is not the United States Constitution, but is actually the Declaration of Independence, where in the second paragraph it is stated, a profound statement that had political, social, and economic implications, that gave the system of democracy and the system of capitalism, because they're systems, its unique form. One thing that gets lost, especially in the West, is that you believe democracy is the answer for everything that the West represents. It's not true. Democracy existed for thousands of years, going all the way back to the early Greeks. They recognized the fundamental flaw or weakness of the democratic system, which was the tyranny of the majority. What made the American experiment and the American democratic and capitalist models so different was it recognized the value of every individual human life, and therefore it recognized the value of the minority. That is why we have freedom of religion. That is why in the First Amendment we have freedom of religion, freedom of speech. Because there was a faith in that interaction, that truth will come out, that a better way will come forth in that honest debate based upon these spiritual principles by which this new republic will be built. That is something that Korea can represent in this troubled time on a global stage. That when we talk about freedom and when we talk about human rights, the only way to make it real is if you recognize that those rights come from some transcendent source. Not any government or human institution. It is a fundamental human right that comes from God, our Creator. That is why I've always been a critic of the American policy of engagement with the North for denuclearization, absent the issue of human rights. Because America's moral authority lies in the principles that it represents. If you take away human rights as a key proponent of your engagement to the worst, most tyrannical regime in the world today, then you take away your moral authority. And how can you talk about economic prosperity when there is no recognition of human rights? And that's one of the reasons why the human rights agenda, rooted in embedded in the Korean Dream framework, is central to this grassroots movement for unification that I'm leading. One of the things that I want everyone in this room to understand is that it's dreamers who change the world. I really liked what you said, Dr. Eberstadt, where you said, why do we want to dream small? No, we should dream big. And the greatest dream of all is building one family under God. But before we get there, let's build one family in Korea first. I believe we live in an amazing time where if we can inspire the next generation, amazing things could start to happen. One of the reasons why I tasked Jim, you need to start to bring in academics that come out of the box, because a lot of times, and I'm doing this in a good-natured way, many times academics stay in their box and they never come out of it, even decades after they wrote their book. Well, the world changes over time. And one of the key things that I face, especially when I speak to many Korean academics and also media and so-called experts on the unification issue, they always cite the studies that were done in the latter part of the 1990s focused on or analyzing what happened in Germany. Well, if we recognize all the mistakes that were made in German reunification, why would we do the same thing in Korean reunification? I never understood their logic or their arguments. And then I would point out to them, you know, the latter part of was the 1990s, China's GDP, I believe, surpassed trillion in 1998. Today, they're 17 trillion. China's growth was fueled by Western capital, Western technology, and Western partnership. Of course, they created a joint venture system in which they captured most of that in China, but that was fueled by the West. You had Mongolia transition from a Soviet-style state to capitalism. Did it cause many problems, social unrest, et cetera, et cetera? Was that transition difficult? No, it wasn't. What about Vietnam? They made the transition from a communist system into a free market system. Was there difficulty in that transition? No, there was not. If you look at the examples, the real world examples, outside the ivory towers of the university, the transition for a communist state to a free market system is not that difficult. The transition is fairly easy because I would proffer to you that capitalism, before Adam Smith and a lot of academics coined it as capitalism, always existed, when human beings could trade. The whole idea of capitalism is basically trading for your own personal benefit. And eventually Adam Smith had the genius to be able to recognize what was going on and say, wow, there's an invisible hand that actually leads to the benefit of the economy, and this is why it is so. But it always existed. I would proffer to you, and the reason why the Chinese, even though they made their transition from a communist system to now the second largest economy in the world, why that transition was so seamless was because Chinese were always capitalists. They were always capitalists. How is it that in North Korea you have a black market? Who taught those North Koreans? They're communists. Who taught them how to create a black market? This is a time in which we need to challenge faulty, old assumptions and recognize the possibility of what the future entails. The Korean dream charts where the end goal should be. It should be the creation of a new nation that benefits not only all Koreans, but this region and the world. I believe, and I've told this to the media many times, I believe that upon unification, within a decade, Korea will become one of the top 5 largest economies in the world. One of the key things that I think scholars like Dr. Eberstadt and others that I'm going to start to bring in to this movement is to do the academic studies and research in terms of how we should move forward. And I want to suggest many different models. Many different models. But I want to challenge the academics, the scholars, to think about the pathway forward. How do we get from here to there? In the best way possible, that can be a win-win for everybody, given all of the examples in the world today. And once we start to build that body of work, then all of the kind of misunderstanding that the young people have, because I find that these polls are so, I don't take them seriously. Because who are the ones who told the young people that you have to carry the burden of unification? It's going to be overwhelming, it's going to be crushing, and then they're going to use the journey. Who's the one who told them all that? It was the same old academics that basically did not progress from the late 1990s to today, and did not look around, come out of their ivory towers, look around the world, and see all the tremendous examples of tremendous success and transformation. Now, what happens if the young people of Korea are given that message? I guarantee you they are going to be the greatest proponents for unification. Because the reality is, I know that a lot of the presentations highlighted how bad it is in the North and how great it is in the South, but I beg to differ in terms of the reality of the South. The Korean economy, given its social demographic and the chaebol system, is not sustainable. The fact that you have the highest unemployment rate among the developed nations, when you have one of the best educated, most highly sophisticated and technical young people in their 20s or 30s, is a reflection of the weakness of the current system. That is why I was never a proponent of South Korea eating up North Korea and bringing it under the South Korean fold. No, the Korean Dream unification framework is the creation of a new nation, because we recognize with eyes open that both systems are flawed, and that we as Koreans, if we have a dream that we can share and dream together, can really create a new nation that is better than the sum of the two parts. That is what the Korean Dream is about. I've mentioned it over and over again, how the two Koreas, North and South, is like a marriage made in heaven. Everything the South Korean economy needs to continue is in the North. So our work is just beginning. I really want to stimulate and encourage the academic scholarship to give your unique insights and your unique study based on the Korean Dream framework of what the possibilities of unification, of what that will offer to all Koreans, and especially the young. You know, one of the key issues that I'm really pushing in South Korea is actually banking and financial reform, because the end goal should be you want as much capital participation by as many Koreans as possible. Systemically, there are a lot of constraints that does not allow that to happen. And I believe that South Korea needs to face it head on to prepare for that. But that's another story. What I would really encourage, like I said, for scholarship, is to start to develop studies, real studies, that's relevant for today, given the experiences that we've seen, given the models that we've seen over the last several decades of what unification could mean for all the Korean people, especially the young. for our friends here in the Philippines. Imagine if there's a unified Korean nation that is 3.5-hour plane ride to the Philippine Islands. I was surprised because usually when I come to the Philippines, I come direct from the United States. I basically stay in Incheon in the transit area, and then I catch my plane to the Philippines. So I never really realized how close the Philippines was to Korea. Well, fortunately, this time I had a chance to go to Korea and stay there. And then it was from Korea that I came here to the Philippines. I was like, my goodness. Are you telling me this is just a 3.5-hour flight? I thought it was 13 or 14 hours. 3.5 hours. And the relationship and the uniqueness of the Korean people and the Filipino people is stark here in Asia. The Korean nation and the Korean people are a nation, just like the Philippines, that is the bridge of East and West. We are the only Christian nations in Asia. We have a unique role to play as a bridge of East to West, of ancient times to modern times. Plus, I heard that you had 4.8 million visitors come to the Philippine Islands, and 26% of them were Koreans. Koreans are the largest tourist population in the Philippines today. We've surpassed Americans. So the partnership between these two nations are amazing. And like all good partnerships, where we share common values, where we share common aspirations, where as I share the Korean dream with the Filipino young people, and the Filipino young people want to be the owners of the Korean dream because it resonates with them. It inspires them. They want to be part of it. Like when I was speaking to these young people a couple of days ago, I was telling them, it was your grandparents and your great-grandparents that came to the aid of a beleaguered South Korea during the Korean War. They're the ones who shed their blood for the freedom of the Korean people that helped develop the South Korean state of today. How would you like it in this generation to go back to the Korean Peninsula and finish what your grandparents could not finish, which was to liberate Korea and allow the Korean people to have a unified nation? And they were like crazy. I want to be part of that. What about the business community? What about the business community? Do you want to be part of that? What about you women here in the Philippines? Do you want to be part of that? Instead of sending your men to fight a war, why not send Filipino families to inspire the Korean family to be whole again? This is a time in which dreamers who are willing to dare, willing to challenge the status quo, can make a difference in the world. So, let us use this conference to stimulate each other, to inspire each other, to kick ourselves in the butt, to become the greater dreamers that can bring a better future tomorrow. Thank you very much.